let's welcome our guest Tomas Mikolov, Sara Polak, and Maurice Chiodo, Wessel Reijers, and Tomas Studenik. I guess that all of them are here, so I will pass the word to you. And what can you see as the first thought when you think about the combination of the artificial intelligence and the blockchains?
But by the way, I'm happy. I was moderating this session, so
okay,
I can take over.
Sorry,
it's no problem. It's fine. To make it easy on you. Yes. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. I didn't mean to kick you out, but we've prepared. So I've got all the questions, so we're all ready. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Hello to everyone online as well. Welcome to the seed stage and to the future of AI and blockchain. Now, it's like a Pokemon, right? You take one sexy buzzword, which is AI, you take another sexy buzzword, which is blockchain, and you fuse them together and hope to make as much money out of it as possible. Right, that's not the aim today. What we're trying to do is bridge those two worlds, because the world of AI is undergoing a huge skyrocketing of interest. People are kind of thinking, what is it going to be for? What are the risks? What are the possibilities? There's a lot of speculation on the topic, a lot of myths, and a lot of bullshit out there, and a lot of scams as well, as with any new technology when it gains kind of wide popularity. But people are also starting to ask questions, is it all right if governments run their own language models? Is it all right if only a couple of big tech companies centralize these large language models? And there's a question that's being asked around the energy of it, behind it, the electricity expenditure, basically like what the innards underneath, like the shiny apps like ChatGPT, what that looks like. I think that blockchain went through quite a similar phase, as again, all technologies do. And the philosophy of blockchain, of decentralizing things, really kind of making sure, giving power back to the people, etc. That nice philosophy that we all want. However, there's also pitfalls there. It can very quickly potentially become autocratic as well, which is something that we discussed. But at the same time, it gives us a lot of potential. Now, is there a crossroads between these two technologies? Should there be an overlap? What are the possibilities? What we shouldn't do, what we should do? All these big questions. Well, we've got the four fantastic people to answer that. So what I'm going to do, just to give you a bit of a flavor of how today is going to run, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions because they can introduce themselves much better than I could possibly ever dream to do. And then after about 25 minutes, I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions. So please be proactive. This is a really big topic, and you have some of the world's greatest experts sitting here in front of you, so use that opportunity. So, without further ado, Wessel, you just had a talk that finished about an hour ago, so you're fresh off the podium, so let's start with you. What do you do, and what is your relation to this topic?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not the world's best expert, unfortunately, but my background is in philosophy. I just did a talk on civic virtue and how it's mediated by different digital systems, like the social credit system on the one hand and blockchain on the other, so I think there's interesting overlap between different technologies. My interest is mostly in the ethics and politics of emerging technologies, which I was for a long time working on blockchain, and now I'm also working on AI because that's where all the money is. So, yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. Yeah.
So my name is Maurice Chiodo. I'm a research mathematician working at the University of Cambridge. For the last 9 years now, I've been setting up and running a project on ethics in mathematics, looking at the ethics and social impact of mathematics, mathematical work, and mathematicians on society. So looking at any mathematically powered technology, tool, seeing what's going on, where harm might come from, how we might think about that, and mitigate the harm. And so that obviously includes blockchain, AI, and any other place any room where there's people doing numbers, I have an interest in, because there's often something dodgy going on and no one realizes what's going on until it's too late. So I'm trying to understand what's happening with rooms full of numbers and how mathematical technologies impact society.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Tomas Studenik. I am an urban hacker. That means I prefer to spend time in cafes thinking about issues than actually doing anything. But 6 years ago, I managed, together with linguists and theater crew, to put together the first play that was written, generated by AI and performed by humans in Prague. One of the actors quit her job based on that experience. And now I use I build startups, I help build startups in an incubator where generative AI helps physicians and doctors with administrative burden so that they can focus on patients. And I spoke on Tuesday here about an experiment, Blackout Prague, what happens when we lose electricity, how our crypto and AI might work, or how we could make it more resilient.
Thank you.
My name is Tomas, and I've been working on language modeling for maybe like 20 years, so I could tell you a lot of stories how things started and evolved and how things were done before and so on. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to the discussion, because when it comes to blockchain, I, on the other hand, don't know almost anything, so I'm looking forward to actually learn something new, and I think that topic is very exciting, and at the same time, I think it will be quite a challenge to come up with some conclusion, because I think a democratization of AI, so that we would not have just a few big tech companies that have a lot of money that they can spend to train and maintain and run these huge AI models today. How to change this so that it would be more like democratized. I think that that's quite a question, and since Sara basically said it, I'm thinking about it. I don't have a solution yet, but I'm looking forward, because we have a lot of people on the panel, that maybe somebody will come with some great solution.
Awesome. So by the end of this, we'd have solved everything, basically. Actually, going on from you, Tomas, obviously, because I know you best, and you're a dear friend of mine and do fantastic work. You've told me a lot of stories when you went to big tech for the first time, like Google Brain. And one of the things that really frustrated you, also coming, from the Czech Republic, from an academic background with, limited resources, that you came to Google, and they're basically just throwing money at the problem. It doesn't matter how much electricity it burns. And therefore, there wasn't almost this kind of evolutionary pressure to make the algorithms kind of more simple, more elegant, etc. And when we were preparing for the panel and we were wondering what to talk about, Maurice had this wonderful historical analogy of when the car engines were getting bigger and bigger and bigger during the 50s and the 60s until the energy crash came, and then you had to suddenly start thinking, okay, we've got limited resources, they can't just keep getting bigger, we have to make them more efficient. And I think that we're coming to this break when the kind of ecological discussion that was had with, crypto mining and the kind of efficiency of blockchain, that was something that was very much discussed. Now we're having this discussion with AI. You see all these infographics of like, this is how much saying please to ChatGPT kills orangutans, etc. And I'm not saying obviously we love orangutans, but we need to go kind of beyond the hype and really look at, for example, the energy that is fueling all these digital tools that we're using. So let's start there, because all the zeros and ones are powered by electricity and some kind of power. So you all have some relationship towards this topic. So how do you think that we can start at that point? Can blockchain be used, or can AI be made more elegant to basically solve this energetic crisis that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the more that we use these tools?
I was going to add here that these technologies use stuff, right? Energy is one of the things that they use, but there's a big pile of stuff. You've got various blockchain technology that uses, for example, proof of space rather than proof of work. And so to succeed there, you need a lot of space, which means lots and lots of hard drives. You may have noticed, sort of 6-7 years ago, the cost of hard drives went up substantially, because these things are now being directed towards proof of space blockchain technologies. We use electricity for not just training, but running these models. We now manufacture lots of chips to try and train bigger and bigger models. So it's not just limited to how much energy these things are burning, but how much other resource they're consuming as well. And then there's also the human resource and consumption of getting people around the world in perhaps low-paid countries to do data labeling, especially data labeling, which is quite distressing for people to be watching or having to label. So the consideration should go beyond how much electricity we're using and look at how much stuff we're using in these technologies and the harm that comes from using that much stuff, and whether it's a good use of that stuff to be creating these tools and toys.
Thank you. Wessel, please.
I think when it comes to the question of energy, we have to also focus on the discourse level very much, because I think a lot of it's not so much only about what is currently happening in data centers and how much it is growing, but also in how some influential actors are talking about this energy issue. And I think what we see is something similar to, maybe a nice comparison with the COVID times. COVID was, of course, something that hit everybody as a kind of an inevitability. You had to do something with it, and that's why also, I mean, being critical about it, I think there was one value, which in this case was public health, which was kind of pitted against all the other values, and which made that the COVID crisis could in some way be addressed without a lot of public debate. And I think that we are facing a similar danger with the AI situation, because you have actors like Eric Smith and Sam Altman and people who are saying that they are trying to sell us this idea of inevitability, of making a historical choice. Like, we have to now make this choice to build all these new nuclear plants. There's an AI race. It's about China or the US. There is a dichotomy. It's like either we do this or we don't do it. And I think that's what we have to be very critical about, because that's exactly what not only gives us maybe the worst boost to the climate crisis, but also gives us a real danger to our own democratic way of relating to this very fundamental problem.
Yes, you mentioned democracy, which is something that we'll also come to. But this whole idea of governance and making these decisions collectively, make no mistake that like 99% of the big things that you're seeing in the media, it's a trade war. That's fundamentally like a lot of what this is. And we've seen it before with electricity, with hemp versus paper, with alcohol, all of these things. There's a big industry players that are behind this. How do you see this? For example, Tomas Mikolov, you spent a lot of times when these big tech players that we have now were just emerging, they were in their nappies and you were there. How do we have to be kind of like critical of these big kind of proclamations that we see in the media? For example, from the side of AI, like what's I know it's difficult to say, but like the line between like the mass hysteria and the reality that there is?
Well, as you are saying it, of course, like the big tech is saying things publicly that sounds good for them, so they usually have some reason to say these things. I mean, like say a year or 2 years ago, the popular message was that if you want to do anything with state-of-the-art models, with the top-level AI, you need to go to work to the US. There's no other choice because they are the only ones who have the resources, which of course wasn't exactly true, but it was the message that actually served, of course, the US corporations the best. Then, of course, a couple of months ago, there was this news from China that they developed basically something that's more or less pretty much as good as ChatGPT, but they did it with much less resources by being creative, efficient. And I wouldn't say that the Chinese were smarter than people in America, but as you were mentioning before, in the US, often the problems were not really like solved by like thinking about efficient solutions. It was often solved like in the easiest possible way, like let's just make 10 times more parameters in the model, and we don't have to pay the bills because we have some huge company backing us, like Microsoft was in the case of OpenAI, will just pay like billions of dollars, and it's all easy. So I think that whenever you find like some inefficiency or imbalance, it also creates opportunity for something new to emerge. And I think that the logical outcome for this huge inefficiency when it comes to using resources well, like money, electricity, and so on, was the emergence of competition from China. I think it can be the same for Europe. Like currently, probably most of the people think that, yeah, in Europe we really don't have any chance to compete with US because we don't have the GPUs, we don't have the data, we don't have the people, we don't have the resources. It's all lost. But I think that there's still a chance. Maybe it's not a huge chance, but there certainly is a chance that we can do things in some different way, a smarter way, and maybe if you just come up with some bunch of clever algorithms, then you can still beat somebody who's like 100 times richer than you and so on. Actually, we are actually trying to do this right now because we started a startup, BottleCap AI, like just like a month or 2 months ago, and we already have some successes compared to like open source software. We can be like 50% more efficient, which maybe sounds good, but our goals are much bigger. We think that the current algorithms that the industry typically uses can be optimized to be like, say, 100 times more efficient. And I think that in the next 5 years, there will be a huge focus on algorithmic efficiency. Everybody did see the focus on hardware. Everybody sees now how NVIDIA is a super rich company because it allows you to train these models faster than using CPUs or cheaper than using CPUs. But you could train them on CPUs as well, just it would be more expensive to do so. And now algorithms are something that it's difficult to change. People take it kind of like for granted, and often there's not that much of exploration, especially in smaller companies and universities. They just take something from GitHub and they just run it. But I think that in the next couple of years, we will realize that things can be done with the same quality, but with much lower price, and it will be quite exciting because the hardware will be also like getting cheaper, and then the software will be getting more efficient. So maybe in 5 years, people working just as researchers at university will be able to train from scratch a model with the same quality as ChatGPT, and we'll see. Maybe it will take a bit longer or shorter, we will see.
Thank you very much. There was that magic word, universities, and I think we're going to get to academia and research, especially in Europe, which is nothing short of a cartel sometimes. But we will get to that. But before we do, Tomas Studenik, you are very unique in the Czech context because Czechs like to pretend that they're brilliant at everything and that there's nothing wrong and not to stick their head up too much, and you do the very opposite. Like you risk things, you talk to the community, you do a lot of projects, you even wrote like several things on the science of failure. So you really are at the front lines, and one of the things that you did is this AI play that you were talking about. I remember back in the day how difficult it was, to cooperate with the research group to get it across the line. Now you could just tell Grok to do it, and it'd be done, in 20 seconds. So technology has gone really quickly, but also, as Wessel mentioned, the idea of failing in AI is seen as a very dangerous thing to do because, like, if you fail, things could go catastrophically wrong, kind of down the line. So, how have you seen it from the community perspective, talking to people who are not maybe, research scientists, who are not experts, but kind of putting AI amongst the people? Like, how have you seen that dynamic shift, or like, how do you feel that people are perceiving this technology?
Well, it's a good question, as is the case with Sara. It's the same thing that I perceive that has happened to most of the digital technologies that I have witnessed over my lifetime appear out of nowhere and suddenly becoming widespread, like cell phones, like social networks, or the internet. So originally, somehow that, for example, social networks, they were here to build connections and let's be all closer and kind of share nice moments. And now I have kids who really suffer mentally, or physically, and socially from being addicted and hooked. And I think this is suddenly we are also realizing that apart from the hype and it's great, we are seeing that there are dangers, and once we outsource like everything's thinking and our intellectual qualities and creative qualities to machines, it will backfire. And it's the more scary when you realize the number of hands or pair of hands that actually manage and own these models and infrastructures. And I think Bitcoin or blockchain is a great inspiration how to prevent that we all willingly and with great fun over the photos it generates, just provide it to somebody without realizing. And I think we should, based on the experience with social media, with mobile phones, with the internet, we should really be careful, and if we can do it, we still have time for our kids to grow into intelligent human beings, not a new Homo sapiens, OpenAI or whatever OpenAI creature. Yeah. So I think it's as with any technology. It can take toll, and it will take toll. So,
yes,
thank you.
Just
to follow on for that briefly, we have to think about and perhaps decide whether we're building these technologies as social spaces or as industrial spaces, and these are different things. The places where we go and do industry, production, trade are different in the world to the places where we go and hang out with friends, socialize, do things between people. You wouldn't go and have dinner in the back yard of a concrete factory, or you wouldn't let your children play in some industrial factory, industrial facility. We separate places where we do industry and commerce from places where we socialize. But we don't do that with the internet. We're not doing that with these new technologies we're creating. With AI, are we producing AI as some sort of social tool? Is it some sort of industrial tool? Are we trying to do both? If we've made the separation for many years in the past in the physical world, why are we now trying to have homogenized spaces to do socializing and industry in the same place at the same time? You wouldn't let your kids play in the backyard of a factory. It's dangerous. It's built for industry, not for human interaction.
Thank you. And you actually both opened up the core of the crux of this question, which is how or if blockchain can help with this, right? Because there was a fascinating discussion between Tim Berners-Lee and Vitalik yesterday, where they actually found a lot of common ground, because like the origin, or like the mental genesis of the internet and the mental genesis of Ethereum are not necessarily that divorced at all. Like, you're trying to give people access to information, you're trying to kind of democratize the access to information, this almost technological emancipation of the people that traditionally in history wouldn't have had access to the printing press or to the local library or to the local university. So the ethos underneath it, while the technology is very different, is actually kind of similar. But it's kind of eroding under AI, because there's such huge centralized leviathans that are producing these algorithms. What can blockchain do? Or can it do anything? Or should it do anything? Is it from the center of maybe decentralizing the energy, decentralizing the computing power? Is it from the when you generate an information with artificial intelligence, giving that provenance of information that, yes, you've got it written on blockchain, that it was generated at this time in this space, and you can track these informations through the cyberspace? What do you think are the use cases where blockchain could tackle these problems with AI?
I don't have an answer to the use case question, but I do think that there's another underlying question here, because I think what might be a danger is that we think that this overlap between, you know, the ideology of the internet and maybe the ideology of Web3 is that we think it's very clear, that there's a very clear understanding of progress, that there's a very clear understanding of where we're going with this, and that also comes, I think, from the very utopian way in which both blockchain and AI are portrayed. There seems to be a clear direction of progress, but I just wanted to, because I'm always very influenced by the things I'm recently reading. So I was reading Alexis de Tocqueville's book on democracy in America, which I think is very urgent now because of what's happening in the States. But he's in one part of the book he describes something very interesting, because he says, why is it actually that democratic nations are showing less of a excellence when it comes to the high sciences and the arts? And one of the answers he gives is it's because they tend to overvalue knowledge concerning application over knowledge for its own sake. And he gives a bit of an Orientalist reading of, because he then says, well, when the first European explorers went to China, they found this empire which was the most prosperous and most advanced place in the world at that time, in the Middle Ages. But at the same time, it seemed super stagnant. So there was this big question of how can they have all these very advanced technologies of the printing press, the gunpowder, etc., and at the same time, they only can maintain them without any progress. And the Tocqueville's answer was, it's exactly because they divorced, their knowledge of application from a search for first principles. They had that second branch of science kind of got lost in history, and that's the only thing they could do is so. What that also, I think we have to question, because now we have this sense of huge progress, advancement of these technologies, and everything seems to be in a really rapid pace of development. But at the same time, maybe we're also facing some form of stagnation, and I think in academia this becomes very clear, where, also in terms of human capacities, I know, being a professor these days, you cannot really work on first principles because you're a manager, and I think. And that is because we focus on application of knowledge. If you're a professor, you have to get funding, you have to apply for grants, you have to, subtract the application value of what you're doing. So that's a long-winded answer in saying like like that idea of progress that sits behind these really powerful technologies. We have to very carefully question, I think, because it is not necessarily leading us to a non-stagnant society.
Yes, you're echoing this meme that I love memes. I learned through memes. There's this meme saying, it's like a screenshot of a tweet, so it's arguable if it's a meme. But it's basically saying, yeah, I could be as famous as Plato if I could just like sit around and be like the 10th person alive to think. Obviously, that's a massive exaggeration, but what you're saying is like the abstraction upon abstraction that we see in academia these days, like the over kind of focus and at the same time becoming essentially a manager and like not being able to do academia. You've really beautifully played into my hand because I wanted to ask Tomas, you have been kind of against your will a little bit, but like in the middle of a Czech media storm, which is, you know, saying a lot. It's like 15 people involved. And you have left the Czech academic sphere, and like kudos to you that you managed to sit through it for 5 years. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but fundamentally you came back from these big tech companies and you said, hey, I've achieved something in AI, I want to come back, I want to help, I want to build an AI ecosystem. And essentially what you had to do is like go and like knock on ministers' doors and beg for money that you didn't get in the end anyway, so you just went and started a startup. What do you think is the role of academia in all this? Because on one hand, it should be the ones asking these basic questions that we're discussing on the panel now, but on the other hand, getting a grant for something like that, or getting approval, or getting the students, that's a long-winded process. So what do you think is the role of academia in all this?
Yeah, I'm afraid that sort of answering all these questions would take way too much time, so I don't even know where would I start. I think the analogy with China was actually kind of interesting in the sense that but it was like the most advanced empire in the world that actually kind of crumbled to European technology because of some reasons. Like I don't think that it was like constantly the same. There was like some period where actually China was afraid of the new technology and stopped funding it actually, and they were afraid that there will be huge social changes if there will be the industrial revolution of the same type that happened in Europe, which led actually to like some unpleasant consequences that we know, like some kings being beheaded and so on. So I think actually it was very much planned in China that they didn't want to go through like some difficult phases of like social changes, and they didn't want to have the progress in the same space as Europe had, and that actually led in the end to even a bigger catastrophe, which was like colonization of China by the Western European countries, and then the civil wars and so on. I don't want to talk all about the history, but I think that we as Europe are kind of like facing a little bit similar problem, that we are adding bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy, where actually the main purpose often gets lost. There are like basic questions like where are we going as Europe? Like do we want to save the nature, or do we want to have the technological progress? Do we want to have people who don't work at all and have basic universal income and just read books, or travel, or do we want to be like the number one in technology or number one in, I don't know, arts? I think that it's not clear to me. Europe like is in a situation where many people actually don't know what the direction is, and what you are talking about, you said my example, but I can assure that there's a lot of many other people who are exactly in the same position as I was, who are leaving Europe to US, for example, where they have more opportunities, and I think that we can still change all of this, maybe, of course, again, I'm not sure what the chances are, but it's possible. But we would have to go back to the basic principles, like what do we want as Europe? Like what is important for us? What are the priorities? What are the less important things? And I think that we will be probably trying to answer these questions in the next few years. I think that there's a lot of many people are not exactly happy with the direction that Europe has been taking over the last maybe 10, 15 years when it comes to especially the economic growth or lack of it compared to the rest of the world. And I think that it has been happening over the last year, maybe that European representatives have been talking more and more about like this loss of competitiveness and we need to take it back. It's not going to be easy. I think that one of the first steps should be like to erase as much as bureaucracy as possible, to go back basically to people doing real things and just signing papers and sending money here and there forever. So that's my opinion. I know that I kind of like answered a more general version of the question. I was not talking so much about myself because I think really like that's just one story, but there are like thousands of stories of this type. And yeah, I was even like thinking about like commenting something on the previous question, but I would be talking for too long. So yeah, well, let's leave it for later.
Don't worry, we'll get back to you. Yes, please, of course.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with Ethan Tu from Taiwan AI Labs, who says, you have a choice with Gen AI. Either you send the data to the US servers, and then it will be commercialized. Someone will make money out of your data. Or you send it to Chinese servers, and then you're under control, and etc. So even, I think Taiwan is kind of similar to our position. We no longer want to send it to the east, nor to the west, so we are looking for a definition of Europe. America is power, yeah? China is control. And so what is Europe? What are we? And the usual answer is something like, freedom, or we are human, or we are, I don't know, liberté, égalité, fraternité. What's the right buzzword? But it's a serious discussion, and the use case that Sara asked for that comes to my mind and is really important is that of healthcare data. So your own health and medical data. There is a European health data space legislature which will enable every citizen of the European Union by, I don't know, with 2030 to be in control and command of her or his own medical data, and should be able to decide whom to provide it for, to which hospitals, which research institutions, which commercial companies to make money out of your healthcare data. And currently, as a hospital, as a physician, you cannot send medical data to US or China. It has to stay on premise. So the solution in the future might be some federated GPTs or on-premise solutions, and blockchain is a way forward how it should be clear what you as a patient have allowed. So it needs to be stored and clear and independent of any interference, because that's the most precious data. So I think combining somehow blockchain with AI, and we can see AI in medicine is analyzing, predicting, helping physicians make better diagnoses. So I think a combination of blockchain AI in relation to patient data and who can use the data, who can access the data is a great use case, where a pilot, I think, might be something you might want to help with.
Yes, thank you. Maurice, please, yes.
One thing I always tell my students about new technologies is you have to envisage what these encourage people to do, or these enable people to do, new behavior that might come. So blockchain technology seems like a great way for people to maybe federate and share data that they have. It might be medical data, it might be behavioral data, it might be data about how they do their job, whatever it is, data coming from them about them, quote unquote, their data. But the difficulty now is that you're turning this data that they have into something which has financial value. You're monetizing it. Now, when you monetize something that the poor possess, it is the poor who are most inclined, who are most incentivized to realize that monetization. It might be the case that you say everyone has free choice as to whether they share and how they share and sell and trade and federate their data. But when you're on the breadline, when you're worried about paying your heating bill and you're buying food, and someone comes along and says, hey, this thing that you've got sitting in your pocket now has some sort of financial value, then you're kind of obliged to sell that. out of some level of desperation. The reasons why we have very strict rules around organ donation, organ sales, because otherwise this can very easily become exploitative. So by making mathematically powered tools that let people realize, trade, sell things like data that they couldn't beforehand, even if we give them free choice to say you can choose whether they sell us or not, well, for some people it's not really free choice. It might seem like free choice. They can choose to or not, but they're essentially choosing between turning the lights on, paying for the heating bills, buying food or not buying food. And for some of the family, that's not really a choice.
Thank you. And you all raised an interesting point that kind of culminates in for me at least, the fundamental question. We talk about China, USA, and Europe. That's what the memes are about, right? Sub-Saharan Africa, where is that? And we might think, oh, come on, almost this neo-colonial view of they don't have the infrastructure. Well, I was in a hackathon that was done in Ethiopia, and we were at the reception of just this random hostel in Addis Ababa, and the receptionists were in these signal groups, trading crypto, just talking about it, amazing. Here in the Czech Republic, you're kind of begging people to go on courses, trying really hard to kind of digest it for them. There, because there is a necessity to do it and you don't even have enough dollars in circulation, crypto is the thing that they just automatically revert to, and you don't need to study it at Oxford or Imperial to be able to do that. You just get on with it because you have to. And I think that we're forgetting half of the world geopolitically when we have these discussions. And I'm getting back to the kind of cypherpunk idea of crypto and cryptography more than cryptocurrency that was discussed yesterday as well, where we're still talking about these geopolitical entities, owning the data or dictating the direction. But I think the reason why a lot of us are here because we want to see this happen bottom up. But, and Maurice, you said this when we were preparing for the panel, we have to be very careful with AI because you're putting something that you don't really understand how it works, how the innards of the algorithms work, on something that can't be changed, right, in terms of blockchain. So I'm just wondering how we balance this, heading in some kind of direction as humanity and having some kind of directive, but at the same time leaving it to the people and not just creating a geopolitical game out of it. Do you think that blockchain can bring this sense of cypherpunkness to the AI community as well? And is that desirable?
I recall discussions about this new thing, Bitcoin, 15 years ago, when this thing was about $1 each. Okay, disclaimer, I didn't buy any at $1, oops. But I recall the discussion there, and it was a discussion about how this absolute form of mathematics can free us. And actually it's an interesting distinction between blockchain and AI. So blockchain gives us a very absolute type of use of mathematics. Everything's verifiable, provable, encrypted, not decipherable, very, very absolute. You know exactly what's happening at every single bit of the way, mathematically speaking. And then you compare that with AI, which is quite the opposite. It's this big sort of stochastic process, big statistical process, this correlation machine. You have very little understanding of the little bits involved. You see this sort of big outcome at the end, this big sort of end stuff happening, but you have nowhere near the amount of fine-grained understanding that you do mathematically as you do with cryptographic-based technologies. So these are two technologies that mathematically go in very different directions. One is about as precise as you can get, mathematically speaking, and the other is about as statistical, as random as you can get. You're looking for patterns and correlation in data that you can't possibly understand or verify as a single human being, or even perhaps a very large collective of human beings. So you're trying now people are trying to sort of reconcile these two together, and as I mentioned earlier today, you're taking something that is very difficult to understand in AI, and you're attaching it and running it on something that's very difficult to stop. This is your blockchain. So if these two come together in the wrong way, rather than having something that might liberate and free us, you might end up in the reverse situation. And the cypherpunk discourse around blockchain was that you could understand everything. That was the idea. We know exactly what's going on. We can control it. We can see it. Everything's there, provable, mathematically beautiful. And now you want to stick AI on that. The thing that you have the least possible understanding of, the absolute least possible understanding. This completely breaks the cypherpunk dream of, okay, here's a thing that we can understand and use as a freedom enabler. You're going to stick this randomized process on it. And then kind of close your eyes, click your heels together 3 times and say, there's no place like home. I mean, okay, Dorothy, have fun. This could end really, really badly. And so it requires some element of caution to say, maybe we shouldn't necessarily run ahead and stick the thing that you don't understand onto the thing that you can't turn off. Maybe not just yet.
Thank you. From an AI perspective, Tomas, if you don't mind me asking, there's a huge push. I was recently at in Brussels when I was told about how digital sovereignty is going to happen in Europe, including quantum computers, of course. So that was a lot of fun to listen to. But nonetheless, one of the big strategic pillars for AI was explainability of algorithms. There's a lot of misunderstanding around AI, what it does, how much of that is the narrative of the big tech. It's like KFC, the 11 herbs and spices. You don't want to give away the secret, so you're not going to necessarily say what's inside the black box, and how much of it is actually you cannot explain it mathematically. Because we're trying to kind of deconstruct these two technologies now. Blockchain, as Maurice mentioned, is pretty straightforward mathematically. Well, not straightforward, I can't do it, but you know what I mean, transparent. AI, not so much. How do you view this as an AI expert?
Well, hard to say, because I think that it's again good to know where we are heading. I think that explainability has been a topic in the machine learning community for at least 10 years, as far as I remember. I think it's interesting direction, but I would hesitate to say that it's the most important direction, because we can actually ask what can we get out of it. I can imagine that we can build maybe less capable but more explainable models. That's certainly doable. Well, but why exactly would we do that? Do we want to have a chatbot where we can see, for example, all the links where it's getting the information, if it will mean that if we want it to be 100% explainable, it will degrade into a search engine that will just give pointers to existing website, which is exactly not as powerful as chatbots that are combining information. Well, maybe somebody would want that, maybe somebody wouldn't. Maybe we should leave this to the free market rather than saying that, okay, this is my preference, everybody should follow it. So I'm not exactly sure. For me personally, explainability is not the most important thing. For me, the performance is actually quite the number one. I would want to have algorithms that are as good as possible to solve general tasks as we can. And I'm totally fine if other people have different priorities. If somebody wants to have more explainability, I know that, for example, banks are heavily regulated. If they want to use this technology, they really need to have this explainability, not because they want to, but because they have to. So of course, that's the case. But I think that one thing that also because we already discussed this difference between, say, US, China, Europe, I think that we can even simplify it. It's not so much just China likes control more maybe than US, and US is very much about the power. Yes, I agree with that, but maybe even simpler, we can say that US and China are very capitalistic. They are interested in making money, and they want to be powerful, both of them actually. While in Europe, we often end up in these discussions whether we should give ChatGPT some robot rights, whether it should be allowed to go for holidays. And I don't know, and basically I just feel that we are somewhat far from the real world, and instead of having the capitalism where either create technology that people are buying, or you lose and you go bankrupt, here we often are discussing high-level topics, then we are distributing money in some ways that were decided by people in Brussels, as you already mentioned, who maybe not exactly know how the technology works. Sometimes they don't know it at all, but they are still deciding on where to put billions of euros here and there. And that's the opposite of capitalism. That's more like the planned economy of the Soviet Union, in my view. And I don't think that if we keep thinking this way, that's the good future. So again, I'm totally fine if somebody thinks that explainability is more important, if somebody thinks that it's less important. I don't think that we should be even trying to decide this question. Maybe we should go back to the roots of our society and think about recreating the capitalistic system that is quite successful in the other parts of the world. And again, I'm fine if somebody disagrees, but I just feel that the technological progress is faster, where actually the money is more important, and when the technological progress is driven by private companies that really need to compete over customers, rather than just redistributing money in strange ways.
Thank you.
Can I respond on shortly on the explainability issue? Because I think I agree that explainability is often put forward as something that is in any case desirable without questioning it. But at the same time, I think the same counts for performance and accuracy. I think both of these values, if you would call it like that, have a struggle with purpose. For example, you can have great accuracy of an AI system that is really good at throwing a lot of bombs on a particular place on the world, for example. And the same thing with explainable AI. You can have like beautiful explanations where you don't need them. But that's all I think where the two converge is this question of purpose. And I think we can from my perspective, like explainability just says that if AI is integrated in a discursive situation, like for example in a court, where you have a judge, you have a lawyer, you have the jury, what is the point of a court? The point is not just that you have the most accurate outcome. Like, even though you might think that is actually that's the whole point. But the whole point is also that you have this discursive relationship between those people in the court. Like there's a democratic function, for example, of the jury. And in this discursive situation, explainability does play a big role. Not always as a desirable thing, but it does play a big role. But it doesn't play a role as in like something that is always good per se, but it's only good in this particular context. And I think that's why we have to think this contextually, like because there are more and more contexts in which AI is going to shape a discursive situation where there is a question of accountability and there is also a requirement for explainability, but we have to think about what do we actually mean there. So I think, like, I kind of agree with you and I don't agree with you. So that we shouldn't also not throw it out of the window, but we have to really be more careful what we mean with explainability in a particular context in which it is being applied.
I didn't say at all that we should throw it out of the window. I was basically just commenting that it should not be some panel of guys who decide whether it's important and that the next 5 years will be funding explainable AI in the whole European Union. I was saying that the free market should actually make these decisions, and I feel that explainability is just one feature of AI. We can increase it, we can decrease it, but I don't want to be the one who decides whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that maybe it should be the people. If there are banks that, for example, want to use machine learning systems and they want them to be explainable, and they will buy these solutions, I'm totally fine. But then we don't have to discuss these things on the panel, whether it's like this important and that important. This way we could actually discuss hundreds of small features in machine learning, whether it's better to have neural networks or SVMs because they are more maybe explainable, or maybe we can be discussing all about training data and whether banks should be using systems that were trained on public data or it should be forbidden. I just think that we can drown in a lot of like small details this way. So that's why I was trying to make like more like a higher level picture, which was like let's try to bring more free market into this question. And yeah, explainable AI, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I think it can be interesting. And as you are saying, if it can be used to improve accuracy or like improve understanding of what the system is actually telling us, so maybe not so high accuracy, but actually the humans who take this system can make better outcomes. That's totally fine with me. Just let's not go into the details, and maybe we can just say, okay, it's a nice feature, but if the free market decides what it wants, maybe that's the best.
Yes, and then questions from the audience. Perfect, thank you.
So there's a reason why we're interested in explainability. There's a reason why we're interested in accuracy. And this comes from already an existing free market idea, and it's called trust. You want to understand whether and how you can trust a system. And explainability helps you learn whether you can trust the system. Accuracy, past accuracy, helps you understand whether you can trust the system. We trust humans. The market requires us to trust humans. You can explain always what a human's thought when that's thing, but over time you can build and learn and earn this trust. So these two mechanisms, explainability, accuracy, lead towards the thing you actually are looking for, the thing which is useful to you, which is, can I trust this object, this AI? Can I trust this thing and what it's doing, what it's providing, what it's producing for me? This is, again, where you see quite a difference in AI and blockchain. Blockchain is built as a giant trust machine. The whole point there is to engineer trust, first and foremost. With AI, you have to earn trust over time. Explainability, accuracy, things like this give you, over time, a vehicle to earn this thing, trust, which you already have great value for and is built into the free market system.
Thank you very much. Yes, trust is definitely underlying both of those technologies. And by the way, just an example so you can see how this is already coming to play, the intersection of AI and blockchain. For example, the Ocean Protocol, where it's been existing, I think since 2017, but it is one of those things where you can, for example, get AI data services, but they're verifiably on blockchain. Again, it's a bit of a Pokemon. I think it's a bit like sometimes clumping just two things together for the sake of it, but these systems are already out there. Right. A lot of existential and technological questions that have come up. Do you have any of your own, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. I would throw this at you, but I'm afraid I would kill you. So if someone could help me out, yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so you mentioned trust as the last thought of this conversation. However, I wanted to ask, we know for a while now that critical thinking is in danger, due to the fact that how we consume information on social media, on the internet, whatnot. But before AI, at least I had to put a question into Google and check the first 3 links on Google. Now I put a question in AI and I take it as it is. So no critical thinking, and we know AI tends to lie or bullshit a lot. So could AI be the last nail in the coffin of critical thinking, and if that's the case, can we do anything to halt it at this point as a society?
By the way, sorry, do you mind if I take this one? Because I just read an article on this where statistically people are actually becoming more critical of the things that they see online precisely because they know about the bullshit that AI generates. So I've actually seen a lot more people question videos and question pictures, etc., than 5 years ago they would with a Google search. Now, like you see a generated image online, it's like, oh, is this AI? And there's a discussion going on whether it is AI or not. So I would actually argue people are becoming much savvier because they know that there's a lot of bullshit, and I think it was like a 20% increase, something which shocked me, but it's just, I read an article recently, if anyone else wants to.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe just to respond on that, because I think there is a difference between skepticism. So, I mean, critical thinking is like this really big thing, of course, you know, like, so you could say that indeed people become more skeptical if they are more confronted with untruths, like with hallucinations and such. But at the same time, I think that is anyway something, so it's like a cultural phenomenon that we see beyond AI. So like this deep-seated skepticism can also feed other problematic things, like, you know, conspiracy thinking, for example. So the question beyond skepticism, which I think you're right, I think skepticism is increasing because of people being more and more uncertain about the truth. But at the same time, that also puts truth in such a bad light that it might be that this constructive criticism, that's maybe the real target of what we have to be careful for. Whether AI is also still allowing people to be constructively critical rather than becoming very skeptical.
Thank you very much, Wessel. Yes.
If you remember your internet searches 25 years ago on Netscape or Yahoo, they were horrible. And you'd have to go down the list and go through many pages to find what you wanted. In that time, these search engines, such as Google, have earned your trust. Because over the years, you've realized, okay, every time I do a search, the top 2 or 3 is going to have enough for me. You've learned, Google has earned that trust from you, and so you don't bother going to, like, when was the last time you went to page 2 of a Google search? You've given up on that because you now trust Google that in the top few searches, it'll bring up the thing that you pretty much want. That was earned. That wasn't the case 25, 30 years ago, cranking it out on Netscape over dial-up internet. We had to go through pages and pages to find the thing that you wanted. That trust has now been earned, and after a while, you don't feel the need to go and go through. AI hasn't earned that trust yet. You haven't been using it for long enough to say, okay, I'm pretty sure this is gonna give me something legit and not some dodgy stuff.
Is that really true? Because at the same time you have this huge enshittification of the internet, you know? Like, so there's people who actually argue that Google used to be better than it is now.
Whether the trust is warranted is different, but you trust it.
There's very few alternatives.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we only have 2 minutes left. Chris is already waiting and mic'd up. Chris, do you mind if I take one more question from the audience? Thank you very much. Please, yes. Oh, yeah, yes. Wonderful, thank you.
Hello. There are some estimates that deepfakes are pretty much going mainstream within a couple of months, and they will be undetectable from the truth. Then combine it with Trump being Trump, and we have a formula for chaos. My question is, as far as I know, blockchain and the authentication, verification of truth is basically the only existing technology right now to this chaos. So my question is, why is it not talked about way more? And do you think, for example, like decentralized media use for politicians is gonna be a thing once the deepfakes will go mainstream more? I have that opinion from some AI experts that the blockchain verification is maybe the renaissance waiting for crypto community. So
the crypto community is very aware of a paper that came out 25 years ago and a recent rewrite of the paper. First one's called Why Can't Johnny Encrypt? And the rewrite is called Why Johnny Still Can't Encrypt. And he's basically going to talk about how you might have a technology that might do something, but if people haven't learned to trust it and learned how to use it, then it's kind of a tree falling in the woods. Who here encrypts their email? Okay, that's like 4. We've had email encryption for 30 years. Right, so actually getting this stuff to stick, getting people to trust that people drive cars not knowing how to use them, not knowing how they work, but over the years I've learned how to trust them. So getting these solutions not just to work on a technical level, but getting them to earn people's trust and getting them usable by people are 2 more steps. Just getting the blockchain right is the first of 3 steps. Another step is getting people to be able to use it, and the next step, the final step, is getting people to trust it. And we haven't got to anywhere near step 2 and step 3 yet.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a wonderful question as well. Unfortunately, it is the end. But you mentioned a great thing that I can end this on, which is deep fakes. And the ancient Romans, always, archaeology back to ancient Rome, that's how you start and end everything. But the Romans, whenever they didn't like someone, they would issue a damnatio memoriae, which was basically take that person out of all the marble slabs. It happened to Commodus. You might know him from the historically accurate movie, Gladiator. But he was so hated that they thought, no, screw this guy, we can't remember him in history. So this whole idea of bullshitting each other, like, Stalin was slowly getting rid of everyone on the photograph until it was just him standing, and people erasing history and playing with history, it's always been there. So the principles of AI and blockchain are absolutely nothing new. They're just on a different scale. They're global and they're digital, but the behaviors are all the same. So I think that it was mentioned a few times today already, we have to go to the very first principles of humans and what we want out of society, what we want out of life, and then replicate those things in the way that we handle information. And no one else big companies are not going to do that for us. Governments are not going to do that for us. We have to decide that for ourselves. And one of the ways to do that is education, which is why it's so fantastic that Eat Prague is open on the 29th today to everyone for free, openly. We need to talk to the normies. We need to talk to people out there. And also we need to be concerned not only about money and how to make money out of it. It's not a casino. We need to make sure that we educate people. And that, I think, is a segue into the wonderful talk that Chris is going to do for us, that it's not all just about the money, but it's about the humanity in things as well. So thank you very much for everything. Thank you for all your questions. Sending love to everyone online. And if you want to catch any of our 4 wonderful panelists, please do so outside gently. Thank you to Tomas, Maurice, and Wessel. Thank you so much. Round of applause, please.
Thank you, Sara.